So today we're going to be talking about factoring trinomials where a is greater than 1, so the squared term is greater than 1. So in number 1 we have 5, which is greater than 1, so we have to factor it. We're going to use a factor sum table just like we did before, but our number to factor is going to be our first term times our last term, so 5 times 6 is 30. So we're finding factors of 30 that sum together to be our middle term of 13. So we can use 2 and 15 would sum together to give us 17. That's a little too high yet, so we can try 3 and 10 would give us 13, which is what we're looking for. We're going to set it up just like we did before. X plus 3 times x plus 10, except we have to do one more step and divide both of our numbers by our first term, which is 5. And so 10 divided by 5 would give us 2, so x plus 2 is one of our factors. This first term we have a 3 over 5 and we don't want a fraction, so if we multiply it by 5, we have 5x plus 3 as our second factor. And number 2, what we should do first is look at each of the terms and see if there's something that we can factor out. And in this case, we can factor out a 2. So we have 3x squared plus 11x minus 4. And now we can multiply our first and our last term, so 3 times negative 4 would give us a negative 12. And we have to find out what factors will give us a positive 11. So we can try a positive 12 and a negative 1, multiply to get us a negative 12, add to give us 11, which is what we're looking for. We need to remember to bring down the 2, and our factors are the x plus 12, x minus 1, and we have to make sure to divide by our first term. And we have to look at our factored one, which is a 3, so put a 3 under each term. So we have a 2, x plus 4, and here we have a fraction, so we multiply it by 3. 3x minus 1 is our factored terms, and we can check this by using the O and the I of FOIL again. So outside times the inside, we have negative x plus 12x gives us 11x, which is equal to our middle term of our factored. Number 3, I want you guys to try on your own, so pause the video, and you should come up with n minus 1 times 2n plus 1. Number 4, again we can look at it and see what we can factor out, which is a 5 in this case. So we have 2y squared minus 7y plus 6, and we multiply our first and our last, so we're trying to find factors of 12 that give us a negative 7. So we can try negative 4 and negative 3 would give us negative 7, which is what we're looking for. Write it in our standard notation. Y minus 4 times y minus 3. And then divide by our first term, which is 2. And make sure to bring down your 5. Bring down your 5 again. 4 divided by 2 is just 2, so y minus 2. And 3/2, we don't want a fraction, so we can multiply by 2, giving us 2y minus 3. And we have our factored term. Number 5, we have 5x squared plus 27x plus 10. We can't factor anything out from all of it, so we have to multiply our 5 times 10. Would give us 50, so we find factors of 50 that add together to get 27. We can try 50 and 1 would give us 51, or 25 and 2 would give us 27, which is what we're looking for. So our factors are x plus 25 and x plus 2. Then we have to divide by our first number, which is 5, giving us an x plus 5. And again, we don't want a fraction, so we have to multiply it by our lower number, which is 5x plus 2. And we have reached our factored solution. Number 6, I want you guys to try on your own. So pause the video and try to work it through. You should come up with a solution of 4x plus 4 times x plus 2. So you should have factored out a 4 to begin with and then work it out. Number 7, we have 24x squared minus 22x plus 3. We can't factor anything else, so we have to multiply. 24 times 3 would give us 72. So we want factors of 72 that add together to get a negative 22. So we can try negative 18 and 4 would give us our negative 4 would give us our negative 22. And then we can write in our factors. X minus 18 times x minus 4. And then make sure to divide by our first term, 24 and 24. We can actually simplify these down, 18 over 24. We can divide both of them by 6. So then we have x minus 3 over 4. And 4 over 24 we can divide by 4 to get 1 over 6. So x minus 1 over 6. And again, we want to get rid of our fractions, so we multiply by our denominator. So we have 4x minus 3 times 6x minus 1. And we can check these by the outside plus the inside. So we have negative 4x minus 18x gives us a negative 22x, and that matches our middle term. So we know that 4x minus 3 and 6x minus 1 are our factors. Number 8, we have 4r minus r squared minus r plus 7. So we multiply our 2, we get 28. And we want to find the factors of that give us a negative 1. So if we try negative 1 and negative 28, we get negative 29. Negative 2 and negative 14 would give us a negative 16. Negative 4 and negative 7 give us negative 11. That's all the factors of 28. And we don't have any of them summing to be a negative 1. So in this case, it's not factorable. And when it's not factorable, we say that it is prime. So now we're going to be talking about the formula for vertical motion, or the height of something thrown into the air. The equation for this is h equals negative 16t squared plus vt plus h sub 0, which is this right here, where t equals time, h sub 0 is the initial height, and v is the velocity. So for our question, we have the science class built a model rocket. They launched the rocket outside. It cleared the top of a 60-foot high pole and then landed in a nearby tree. If the launch pad was 2 feet above the ground, the initial velocity of the rocket was 64 feet per second, and the rocket landed 30 feet above the ground. How long was the rocket in flight? So we have to be able to tell what the important information is. We need time, height, initial height, velocity. So if we read through, we find the initial height was 2 feet. And we can continue reading and find the initial velocity to be 64 feet per second. And the rocket landed 30 feet above the ground. So our final height is 30 feet. So we can set this up using our equation that we just talked about. H equals negative 16t squared plus vt plus h naught. And substitute in what we know. We know that the height at the end was 30. So we have 30 equals negative 16. We're finding the time, how long was the rocket in flight, so we don't know t. So t squared is just left, plus velocity we did find out was 64 feet per second, so we have 64t, plus h naught, the initial height, we found to be 2. So now we take our equation and just like we learned in the last section, set it equal to 0. So subtract 30 and we have negative 16t squared plus 64t minus 28. And we can factor this using our factor sum table. And we want our first times our last, so negative 16 times negative 28 would give us 448. And we want the factors of that would add together to be 64. So we can try 16 and 28 and adds together to be 44, so little small. We can try 8 and 56, and that would give us our 64. But one thing that I want to do first is divide this whole equation by a negative, so then I can have a positive t squared. So if I do that, I have 16t squared minus 64t plus 28. So for my factors, I still have a positive 448, but I want a negative 64. So I'll just change my factors into negative. Now I can write this just like I would the rest of them. T minus 8 times t minus 56. And divide by my original first number. So divided by 16. And I can simplify the 8 over 16 to 1 over 2. And then multiply that out, so I have 2t minus 1. And 56 over 16 can simplify down to 28 over 8 by dividing both sides by 2. And then multiply 8t minus 28. And then when we learned how to solve equations for variables, I can set both terms equal to 0. So I have 0 equals 2t minus 1, or 0 equals 8t minus 28. And I can solve for both. So for the first term, add 1, then divide by 2. So 1 equals 2t, t equals 1/2. Or add 28 equals 8t, divide by 8, t equals 3.5, so 3.5. And then we're looking back at the question, we want to find how long was the rocket in flight. So this is telling us that it could either be 1/2 or 3.5. And we're finding when the height is equal to 0. So our 1/2, so since I want the total amount of time in flight, I want the ending time, which is the 3.5. So how long was a rocket in flight? 3.5 seconds. And that's the lesson for today.